The United States Navy once ruled the depths of the world's oceans with unmatched dominance. Silent, lethal, invisible, American attack submarines were the apex predators of the deep, capable of turning the tide of any conflict before the enemy even knew they were there. But right now, as we speak, that dominance is slipping through our fingers like water through a clenched fist. Between 2018 and 2025, the U.S. Navy set an ambitious goal to build 2 Virginia-class attack submarines every single year. It was a promise, a commitment to maintaining our underwater superiority. But here's the brutal truth: we're failing. We're missing our targets, and the consequences could reshape the balance of global power for decades to come. Let me take you back to understand just how critical this problem really is. The Virginia-class attack submarine isn't just another piece of military hardware. It represents the cutting edge of American naval power, a technological marvel that costs approximately $3.4 billion per boat. These submarines are designed to hunt enemy vessels, gather intelligence, launch cruise missiles, deploy special operations forces, and maintain America's strategic edge beneath the waves. They're quieter than anything our adversaries have. They're more advanced, more capable, and we desperately need them. The plan was simple on paper: build 2 attack submarines per year, maintain a fleet of at least 66 attack submarines to meet the Navy's operational requirements around the globe. That number, 66, wasn't chosen arbitrarily. It was calculated based on the missions these submarines need to perform, from monitoring Russian naval activities in the Arctic to countering China's growing fleet in the Indo-Pacific, from protecting carrier strike groups to conducting covert intelligence operations that never make the news. Every single one of these missions is critical. Every single submarine matters. But somewhere between the planning rooms and the shipyards, something went terribly wrong. The 2-a-year target that seemed achievable back in 2018 became an impossible dream. Year after year, the numbers came up short. Delays mounted, costs escalated, and the gap between what we promised and what we delivered grew wider and wider. Now, let's talk about the real-world implications of this failure, because this isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet or disappointing Pentagon officials. This is about American security. This is about the safety of our sailors. This is about maintaining the balance of power in an increasingly dangerous world. China is building submarines at a pace that should terrify anyone who understands naval warfare. Russia is modernizing its underwater fleet and becoming more aggressive in international waters. And here we are, falling behind on our own production targets. The Virginia-class submarine program is centered at 2 primary shipyards: General Dynamics Electric Boat in Groton, Connecticut, and Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia. These aren't just any shipyards. They represent the pinnacle of American industrial capability, employing tens of thousands of skilled workers, engineers, and technicians. Building a nuclear-powered attack submarine is one of the most complex manufacturing challenges in the world. It requires precision down to the thousandth of an inch. It demands materials that can withstand crushing ocean depths. It needs nuclear reactors that can operate safely for decades without refueling. So what went wrong? Why are we missing these targets? The answer is frustratingly complex, a perfect storm of interconnected problems that have compounded over the years. Let's start with the workforce issue. Building submarines requires an incredibly specialized skill set. We're talking about welders who can work with exotic metals, electricians who understand nuclear systems, pipe fitters who can install miles of complex piping in confined spaces, and engineers who can integrate cutting-edge technology into a platform that needs to operate in the most hostile environment on Earth. For years, these shipyards struggled with workforce retention and recruitment. As experienced workers retired, taking decades of knowledge with them, the yards found it increasingly difficult to replace them with equally skilled personnel. Training a submarine shipbuilder isn't like training someone to work on a car assembly line. It takes years to develop the necessary expertise. And during that training period, productivity suffers. New workers make mistakes that experienced hands wouldn't. They work slower. They need supervision. And all of that translates into delays and cost overruns. The COVID COVID-19 pandemic made everything exponentially worse. In 2020 and 2021, shipyards had to implement strict health protocols that slowed production. Workers who tested positive had to quarantine. Social distancing requirements meant fewer people could work in the tight confines of a submarine hull at the same time. Supply chains that were already stressed broke down completely. Critical components that used to arrive on schedule were suddenly delayed by weeks or months. Vendors who supplied specialized parts shut down or reduced capacity. The ripple effects are still being felt today, but the problems go deeper than just the pandemic. The supply chain for submarine construction is breathtakingly complex and fragile. A single Virginia-class submarine contains millions of parts sourced from thousands of suppliers across the country and around the world. Many of these suppliers are small businesses that only serve the defense industry. They operate on thin margins and can't easily scale up production when demand increases. When one supplier faces problems, whether it's a labor shortage, a quality control issue, or a financial crisis, the entire program can grind to a halt. Take, for example, the suppliers of specialized valves, pumps, and fittings that control the submarine's ballast and propulsion systems. There are only a handful of companies in the United States that manufacture these components to the exacting standards required for nuclear submarines. If one of them falls behind schedule, there's no backup plan. The shipyard can't just order the parts from Amazon or find an alternative supplier. They have to wait. And while they're waiting, thousands of workers are standing idle. The schedule slips further and costs continue to climb. Then there's the issue of concurrent programs. The same shipyards building Virginia-class attack submarines are also working on Columbia-class ballistic missile submarines, the next generation of America's nuclear deterrent. The Columbia program is the Navy's top priority, and rightfully so. These submarines will carry the majority of America's nuclear weapons for the next 50 years. But prioritizing Columbia means diverting resources, workforce, and attention away from Virginia-class construction. It's a zero-sum game played out on the factory floor every single day. Electric Boat and Newport News are essentially being asked to do more with the same resources. Build Virginia-class boats. Build Columbia-class boats. Maintain quality. Stay on schedule. Control costs. It's an impossible balancing act, and something had to give. Unfortunately, what gave was the 2-a-year target for attack submarines. The financial implications of these delays are staggering. When submarine construction falls behind schedule, costs don't just stay the same. They increase dramatically. Workers who should be moving on to the next boat are instead stuck fixing problems on the current one. Materials ordered for a specific delivery date arrive when they're not needed and have to be stored, sometimes for months. The longer a submarine sits in the yard, the more expensive it becomes. And those cost overruns come directly out of the Navy's budget, forcing difficult choices about what other programs to cut or delay. Let's put some numbers to this. In fiscal year 2018, the Navy planned to accept delivery of 2 Virginia-class submarines. They got one. In 2019, they wanted 2. They got one. In 2020, the target was 2, and once again, they received just 1. The pattern repeated itself year after year. By 2025, instead of having 14 to 16 new attack submarines delivered, the Navy had received significantly fewer. Each missing submarine represents not just a capability gap, but also billions of dollars in sunk costs and extended production timelines. Now, I need you to understand something crucial about how submarine fleet numbers work. Submarines don't last forever. Even with the best maintenance, a nuclear attack submarine has a service life of about 33 years. That means every year, older boats are being decommissioned and retired. If you're not building new submarines faster than old ones are retiring, your fleet shrinks. And that's exactly what's happening to the U.S. Navy right now. At the beginning of this period in 2018, the Navy had roughly 51 attack submarines in service. The requirement, as I mentioned, is 66. We were already short. The plan was to build our way back up to that requirement over the next decade. But with production falling short year after year, that gap isn't closing. It's actually getting wider in some projections. Analysts now predict that the attack submarine fleet could drop into the low 40s before it starts to recover, assuming production rates improve. What does a smaller attack submarine fleet mean in practical terms? It means fewer submarines available for critical missions. It means longer deployments for the boats that are in service, which increases wear and tear and reduces the time available for maintenance. It means sailors spending more time at sea, away from their families, which affects morale and retention. It means regional commanders around the world having to make difficult choices about which missions to prioritize and which threats to monitor. The Pacific Fleet is particularly vulnerable. China's People's Liberation Army Navy is now the largest navy in the world by number of ships. They're building destroyers, frigates, aircraft carriers, and yes, submarines at a rate that far exceeds American production. Chinese submarines may not be as advanced or as quiet as American Virginia-class boats, but quantity has a quality all its own. If China can field 3 or 4 submarines in the time it takes us to build one, they can compensate for technological disadvantages through sheer numbers. And China isn't just building submarines. They're building the entire infrastructure to support a global naval presence. New bases, advanced sensors, long-range anti-ship missiles, satellite networks. They're creating an integrated system designed to challenge American naval dominance in the Western Pacific and beyond. Every month that passes without the U.S. Navy receiving the submarines it needs is a month that China uses to close the gap. Russia presents a different, but equally serious challenge. Russian submarines, particularly their newest models, are exceptionally quiet and capable. They're operating more aggressively in the North Atlantic, probing NATO defenses, trailing American and Allied vessels, and demonstrating that Russia still considers the undersea domain a critical arena for competition and conflict. The Russian Navy may be smaller than it was during the Cold War, but it's more focused and more dangerous in key areas. American attack submarines are essential for tracking and countering these Russian boats. They monitor Russian naval bases, follow Russian submarines when they deploy, and position themselves to respond if hostilities break out. But with fewer submarines available, the Navy has to make hard choices. Do you keep a boat in the North Atlantic watching Russia? Or do you send it to the Pacific to monitor China? Do you support a carrier strike group? Or do you conduct intelligence gathering missions? There are no good answers when you don't have enough assets to cover all the missions. Let me tell you about the human cost of these delays, because it's not just about steel and technology. It's about the sailors who crew these submarines. Submarine duty is one of the most demanding jobs in the military. These men and women spend months underwater, isolated from the world, operating in an environment that is inherently dangerous. The stress is immense. The sacrifice is real. And they do it knowing that their mission is critical to national security. But when the fleet is too small, these sailors pay the price. Deployments get extended. Time at home between missions gets shortened. The operational tempo becomes unsustainable. And eventually, talented sailors decide they've had enough and leave the service. The Navy then faces not just a shortage of submarines, but a shortage of trained submariners to crew the boats they do have. It's a vicious cycle that's difficult to break. The shipyard workers are also suffering. Many of them are incredibly dedicated to their craft. They take pride in building the most advanced submarines in the world. But the constant pressure, the schedule slips, the finger pointing when targets are missed, it all takes a toll. Morale in these shipyards has been a concern for years. Workers see the problems. They know the challenges. And they often feel like they're being blamed for systemic issues that are beyond their control. So what's being done to fix this crisis? The good news is that the Navy, the shipbuilders, and Congress all recognize that something has to change. There have been significant investments in workforce development. Both Electric Boat and Newport News have launched ambitious hiring and training programs to expand their workforce. Tens of thousands of new workers have been brought on board in recent years. Apprenticeship programs have been expanded. Partnerships with technical schools and community colleges have been established to create pipelines of skilled labor. There have also been major investments in infrastructure. Shipyards have expanded their facilities, built new construction halls, upgraded equipment, and modernize their processes. The goal is to increase capacity so that multiple submarines can be worked on simultaneously without creating bottlenecks. These investments are substantial, running into the billions of dollars, and they're starting to show results. Supply chain resilience is another area of focus. The Navy and prime contractors are working to identify critical suppliers who represent single points of failure and helping them expand their capacity. In some cases, they're funding the construction of new production facilities. In others, they're qualifying additional suppliers so that there are backup options if one vendor falls behind. It's slow, painstaking work, but it's essential for long-term program health. Advanced manufacturing techniques are also being explored. Can robots perform some of the welding tasks? Can 3D printing produce certain components faster and more reliably? Can virtual reality be used to train workers more effectively? These aren't silver bullets, but they're part of a broader effort to modernize submarine construction and improve efficiency. Congress has been relatively supportive, providing additional funding for submarine construction and workforce development. There's bipartisan recognition that submarine capability is critical and that falling behind is not acceptable. However, money alone can't solve all the problems. You can't buy experienced welders. You can't purchase supply chain reliability. And you can't fund your way out of the fundamental challenges of building incredibly complex machines. There's also been discussion about the industrial base more broadly. The United States has allowed its defense industrial capacity to atrophy over the decades. Shipyards have closed. Suppliers have gone out of business. Expertise has been lost. Reconstituting that capacity is a generational challenge. It requires sustained investment, strategic planning, and patience. Results won't come overnight. Some defense analysts have proposed dramatic solutions. Should the Navy lower its standards slightly to allow submarines to be built faster? Should we bring in foreign partners to help with construction? Should we design a less capable but cheaper and faster to build submarine to supplement the Virginia class? Each of these ideas has proponents and critics. Each involves trade-offs between capability, cost, and risk. The international implications of America's submarine construction struggles shouldn't be underestimated. Allies and partners watch closely to see if the United States can maintain its commitments. Countries like Australia, which has entered into the AUKUS agreement to acquire nuclear-powered submarines with American help, are betting their security on American industrial capacity. If we can't build enough submarines for our own Navy, how can we help others? These are questions that have diplomatic and strategic consequences. China, meanwhile, is watching and learning. They see the delays. They see the struggles, and they're doubling down on their own shipbuilding efforts. Chinese state media has highlighted American production problems as evidence that the United States is a declining power, unable to maintain its military edge. Whether that narrative is true or not, it's gaining traction in some parts of the world. The technology race is also intensifying. While we're struggling to build Virginia-class submarines, our adversaries aren't standing still. They're developing more advanced torpedoes, better sonar systems, longer-range missiles, and autonomous underwater vehicles. The Virginia class is an excellent platform, but it was designed years ago. The longer it takes us to build these submarines, the more the technological advantage erodes. Looking ahead, there are reasons for both concern and cautious optimism. The workforce expansions are real. The infrastructure investments are substantial. The focus on supply chain resilience is overdue, but welcome. Production rates have started to stabilize, and there are indications that they may improve in the coming years. Some industry analysts believe that by the late 2020s, the shipyards could actually achieve the 2 per year target on a sustained basis. But we need to be realistic about the timeline. Even if production rates improve tomorrow, it will take years to make up for the submarines that weren't built between 2018 and 2025. The fleet size will remain below requirements for the foreseeable future. The operational pressures on available submarines will continue, and the strategic risks will persist. There's also the question of what comes after Virginia. The Navy is already thinking about the next generation of attack submarines. What will they look like? What capabilities will they need? How will they be built? The lessons learned from the Virginia-class production struggles must inform future programs. We cannot afford to repeat these mistakes. Some experts advocate for a more radical rethinking of how we approach submarine construction. Should we build smaller, less expensive submarines in larger numbers? Should we adopt modular construction techniques that allow for faster assembly and easier upgrades? Should we leverage artificial intelligence and autonomous systems to reduce crew size and complexity? These are profound questions without easy answers. The economic dimensions of this issue extend beyond just the shipyards. Submarine construction supports a vast ecosystem of American businesses, from the major prime contractors down to small machine shops in towns across the country. When submarine programs struggle, that entire ecosystem feels the pain. Jobs are at risk. Communities that depend on defense spending worry about their futures. The political pressure to maintain production is intense. Yet we also have to acknowledge the brutal reality of physics and engineering. Building a nuclear submarine is hard. It's supposed to be hard. These are some of the most sophisticated machines ever created, operating in an environment that would kill their crews in seconds if anything went wrong. The quality standards are exacting because they have to be. Rushing production to meet arbitrary timelines could result in boats that are unsafe or unreliable. That's a risk no one should be willing to take. So what does that leave us? We're at a critical juncture. The decisions made in the next few years will determine whether the United States maintains its undersea dominance or cedes that advantage to rising competitors. It's not hyperbole to say that the balance of global power could shift based on how we handle this challenge. The attack submarine construction bottleneck is a symptom of broader issues facing American defense manufacturing. We've become so focused on high-tech, exquisite systems that we've lost the ability to produce them in adequate quantities. We've allowed our industrial base to contract to the point where a handful of companies and facilities represent critical single points of failure. We've underinvested in the workforce development needed to sustain complex manufacturing over decades. Fixing these problems requires a whole-of-nation effort. It requires government policy that supports domestic manufacturing. It requires companies willing to invest for the long term rather than quarterly profits. It requires educational institutions producing graduates with the right skills. It requires communities supporting the defense industrial base. And it requires the American people understanding why this matters. Because at the end of the day, submarines are about more than just military capability. They're about deterrence. They're about ensuring that potential adversaries think twice before challenging American interests. They're about protecting the global commons and maintaining the freedom of navigation that underpins international trade. They're about having options in a crisis, the ability to respond to threats in ways that don't require massive visible deployments that could escalate tensions. When American attacks submarine patrols beneath the waves, it sends a message. It says that the United States can see what you're doing. It says that we can reach you anywhere, anytime. It says that aggression will be met with overwhelming response. That message is only credible if we have enough submarines to back it up. Right now, we're dangerously close to losing that credibility. The sailors who serve on these boats understand what's at stake. They've dedicated their lives to defending this country, to operating in the silent service where their accomplishments rarely make headlines and their sacrifices often go unrecognized. They deserve better than to be sent to sea in too few boats, stretched too thin, expected to cover missions that should require twice as many submarines. The engineers and workers building these submarines also understand the stakes. They know that their work, done in shipyards far from the public eye, is critical to national security. They take pride in their craftsmanship, in solving problems that would baffle most people, in building machines that push the boundaries of what's possible. They deserve the resources, support, and respect necessary to succeed. This is fundamentally a story about American capacity. Can we still do hard things? Can we still build the systems we need to protect ourselves and our allies? Can we compete with adversaries who are mobilizing their entire economies and societies in pursuit of military advantage? These aren't rhetorical questions. They're existential challenges that will define the 21st century. The attack submarine construction bottleneck from 2018 to 2025 is a wake-up call. It's a warning that we cannot take our military superiority for granted. It's a reminder that maintaining an edge requires constant effort, investment, and attention. It's proof that even the most advanced military in history can stumble when the industrial foundation beneath it weakens. So what happens next is up to us. We can treat this as a temporary problem that will solve itself with time and money. Or we can recognize it as a symptom of deeper structural issues that require fundamental change. We can continue with business as usual and hope things improve. Or we can make the hard choices necessary to rebuild American manufacturing capacity for the challenges ahead. The submarines we're failing to build today are the capabilities we'll desperately wish we had tomorrow. In the Indo-Pacific, in the North Atlantic, in the Mediterranean, in every ocean where American interests are at stake, the absence of those submarines will be felt. Our adversaries will probe for weaknesses. Our allies will question our resolve. And our sailors will be asked to do more with less. This doesn't have to be our future. The problems are serious, but they're not insurmountable. With sustained effort, strategic investment, and national will, the United States can overcome this bottleneck. We can rebuild our shipbuilding capacity. We can expand and train our workforce. We can strengthen our supply chains. We can achieve and sustain the 2-per-year production rate. We can ultimately maintain the attack submarine fleet we need. But it requires acknowledging the problem honestly, without sugarcoating or political spin. It requires leaders willing to make tough decisions and accept short-term pain for long-term gain. It requires commitment from Congress, the Navy, industry, and the American people. And it requires understanding that in the realm of submarine warfare, there are no second-place winners. You either have dominance beneath the waves, or you don't. The choice is ours. The time to act is now. Because somewhere in the depths of the Pacific Ocean right now, a Chinese submarine is on patrol. Somewhere in the North Atlantic, a Russian boat is tracking NATO vessels. And somewhere in an American shipyard, workers are trying desperately to build the submarines we need to counter those threats. The question is whether we'll give them the support, resources, and time they need to succeed, or whether we'll continue stumbling toward a future where American undersea dominance is just a memory. The attack submarine construction bottleneck of 2018 to 2025 is more than a defense program challenge. It's a test of American resolve, capability, and strategic vision. How we respond will echo for generations. Let's make sure we get it right.